All right, welcome back to episode 16 of the Slide In Podcast. I'm Braeden Anderson alongside Kelly Gallup,
Welcome back.
and we've got a whole bunch of stuff to discuss today. Once again, my computer is completely cooked out, so I've got it here sitting as a prop, so you guys can't see me playing games on my phone while Kelly talks. First thing we kind of
They can
wanted,
still see.
yeah, they'll still see. So the first thing we wanted to chat about was a comment from a listener, which my comment is now gone.
I'm triple tea, coffee.
Double coffee.
Huh?
Double coffee plus tea.
Yeah, I just put a little in here. These cups suck. Got a really cool logo.
Yeah, they're nice. If you like cold coffee, they're really good.
Yeah, it's like I've been pouring out of here. I get like a
They call
taste.
them,
I get a taste and then it's freezing.
They call them like camp cups. And my guess
Maybe put
is,
some bitch on the fire, it'd stay warm. But
yeah.
from me to you, from the fire thing will turn into a freaking ice cube.
I was thinking if you wake up camping and you got to get going fast, then it would be nice because your coffee cools off quick and then you can just chug it. But that's about all I can think of.
Shit should stay warm all
Trying
day.
to be positive. Okay, so this was a comment from Zach Pinnell 1498. Once again, we love comments on the YouTube channel. Questions kind of gives us stuff to talk about. So Zach said, "I'd like to hear more about that nearly 5-foot brown on the white. Do they really get that big? Any brown trout recorded at that size?" I have never fished the white,
Me.
so I'm going to kind of flip that over to Kelly.
They get bigger than that, I think. That one, there are certain places in the world where you can just go see these things happen. And people are suspect of that sort of thing. If you were to go down on the white and do like a lot of people do nowadays and go down and shine lights and look around, you will see things, mythical creatures. You will just see things that do not seem possible. They're virtually impossible to get to eat. I think when they get that size, I don't think you could even get them night fishing very often. I think they get pretty sensitive to gut piles, and I'm not even so certain that they are such great predators at that point. I don't know. Nobody knows unless if they would go down and, somebody could dive at night or just watch. But I don't remember which one we did when I was talking about when I was a kid. We shined suckers and speared suckers at night. And you'd see these just giant brown trout. But giant then was 2 foot. You're in a creek and you're spearing suckers, and it's a food thing. Back in the day, people used to, I don't even know if you can still do it, but you could do it in the old days. You could go in and spear, you could go into the Pere Marquette and, or whatever, these famous rivers, but we always did it in creeks. And you'd see these just absolutely ridiculously sized trout. Now that one, the one that ate, kind of breaks my theory in that they're not that great of a predator. I don't know. I just know on the white proper that there was a stat that I don't remember who had it. It might have been Davey. It might have been from Arkansas Game and Fish. That they plant 6 million fish a year in the white system. And I don't know if that's the white proper, or if it takes in any of the little red or any of the other ones, or anything coming out of the lake. I don't know how it really works. But it's still an absolute, and most of them kind of come out of Ennis, actually, the Federal Fish Hatchery. But they said that they were referring to the 6 million plants. And they said that it had, I think it was 94% harvest is what they anticipate, right? So if you've got, let's just say it's 90, if you got 10% of that left over, and by the way, they have fish docks on the river. The river is made, the river is a fake trout fishery. It was a bass river, striper, stuff like that. And then they put the impoundment on it, and now the river runs 52 or 54 degrees all year. I don't give a shit how warm, how cold. It's really deep. And so it took a long time to get its insect life going because it's so cold. pushed all your bass downstream, and then it became a really good trout fishery, right? And so, but it was still Arkansas. It's going to take a while to get people to say Trout, Arkansas, right? It's not really registering. And so they established these fish docks where they'd plant the fish by them, and you could go in and fish and pay, and you could corn, use whatever the hell you want right off. And you're there so it's a put and take fishery. And great, and it's big enough, which is, as they go, it's as good as you get, because they're not out on the river. That put and take thing is they're locked in there, right?
Yeah.
They just stay. And it's great. You got kids there, you got people, family, mostly catching those dumbass rainbows anyway. Every once in a while, somebody will crack some giant brown rainbow on a kernel of corn. He hits the pan pretty quick. It's tragic. But at any rate, that still leaves, if it's 10%, that's still 600,000 fish sitting out there as food, right? But the sidebar to this is the other portion of that 5,400 or 5,400,000 fish get gut on those docks. And they throw those guts out in that river, always.
Right.
And they have developed a special adaptation for carnivores, because think about it, if there's 500 on a good day gut piles in that river floating around, just by one dock, and I believe it's 36 docks. Mm-hmm. Don't quote me on that. It's been a long time since I saw this, but it's close. And there may be more now because it's become very famous and popular. But so you've got fish that, imagine if you eat, because if you all don't grow up eating fish, most people cut the guts out, and the head all is kind of one piece, throw it out, right? So you got a head and a gut pile. And those fish got really hip to eating those gut piles. And so
it's almost pure nutrition. Right?
100%.
It's easier to digest. There's no bones.
You can saw it happen off of right below the state park one night, and there was a bunch of them, and the guy, Steve, was the guy in the cabin next to me, and he said he was watching them, and the shadow came up. I thought we talked about this before, but this giant shadow, and if you go out at night, there's not much generation at night because it's an electrical thing, right? And there's no demand, so they cut that thing down to next to nothing. You go out at night with a big light, it just blows your mind.
So the water drops significantly.
Oh, God, down to nothing. I mean, there's places where when they drop it, like way down, I think all gates closed, it still has because when Crooked was flooding and they're trying to shut that water down, I think they said, I can't remember, it's 50 or 500 CFS comes out of leakage no matter what.
Yeah.
But you could be going from 17,000, right? Or some giant number, right? And so there's times when I've been there where I couldn't run my boats. It's just not going to happen. You'd have trouble running a drift boat down it. Mm-hmm. Just little pods, but cuts down to say 1,000 or whatever. And it's just shallow, and anything you go in there light, and it's like, oh my God. And you see these fish that just are prehistoric and dinosaur-like. But I mean, just Chad Johnson and I were riding up the river one day, and he says, hey, we were just ran over.
Chad like Ocho Cinco?
No.
Oh, all right.
Chad,
not the wide receiver for the Bengals, no?
No, I don't think he can reach
Chad
down
Johnson.
there. Maybe. I don't know. That's Chad. That's it. Chad's a skinny little white kid that he was Dally's head guide when the Dally shop was still open. And
Gotcha.
And one of the first real, he's been there a long time, but he just says, hey, let's cut over here. And he said, I saw something over here yesterday. It was just absolutely huge. I don't know what it was. And we go in there, and it's pretty low, and it's light's really good, pretty good to look down in the water. And it's only about 3 foot of water. Come up by this kind of root wad, and this kind of little back eddy. It's kind of circulating around this thing, and it's making a slow back eddy, which is about 3 foot deep, I'd say. And I'm looking and looking. I'm at the front of the boat, and I said, "Oh," I said, "You got spotted blue carp?" And he says, "Not that I know of. There's no such thing." I was making it up. Trout can get kind of bluish looking on their backs when you look straight over them. And I said, well, in that case, we're looking at a world record. And I'm looking down at this thing. It's so over 4 foot. I don't give it. And it is daytime.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of goes. Some bitch looked like it was that wide. And there's, I mean, like 8 inches wide. It's not probably, but they're just staggering how big they are. Now the one, and by the giants are almost always females. And everyone I've ever seen that's huge, huge, and I don't mean 10 or 15 pounds. That's not don't take me wrong, but if you fish in Lake Michigan and you get all excited about a 15-pound fish, you just haven't fished long enough. I mean, there's just places. It's like a 24-inch brown in the South Island, New Zealand. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
great.
right.
You got something else you want to talk about? I mean, you just in certain places you have certain Jurassic Lake. I mean,
Yeah, are you going to holler about a 2-footer down
or
there?
a 10-pounder.
Yeah,
Because you sure shit ain't going to get anybody's attention. Nobody's going to stop fishing and come see you. So the White River, and there's other rivers like, not quite like the White. I mean, the Little Red was for a long time. I don't know what's happened to that. And Tammy Como, that was some good ones. There was, the Holston for a while. People thought that was going to catch up and do that, but that little bit. A lot of it has to do with everything has to be right. The quality of the water. You got to have resting zones are so critical to huge trout. You have to have when it's really humping, coming down there, just blowing through there, in the whatever time when they're getting their flooding, they have to have shelter. They cannot be on that treadmill.
Right.
I mean, they just wouldn't get that way. And that river's just absolutely the most perfect river there is for that. And it can never get, the only thing that could make the White exceed itself as it is if it stayed at 60 degrees.
Instead of 52.
If it stayed at
54.
60, their bug life would be greater. Their other juvenile fish might be better yet. And there might just be a little bit more, but it's hard to argue that they're there. But the one that we had on, like I said, that thing T-boned. Now that fish, like I said, you never know what triggers the fish to eat. And it was likely where that fish came from was probably less than 3 foot of water, had a point that came off in front of the dock. So no matter how big the water was, and then there's a dock.
Yeah.
These docks aren't like tiny. That dock complex is probably as big as it's probably 24 by 30 feet. Yeah. I'm guessing it's that huge. I mean, I think it's a 3 or 4 slip dock that floats up and down, and they don't come out ever.
Right.
And so they're on those guide wires that come up and down, and there's 2 rails that hold it in place as it goes up and down. It just goes with the flow. And that particular point, because the way the guide wire comes into it, it's almost impossible to get a cast up there. That's why I thought she hooked that guide wire when she hooked the brown trout, the little one. Not a little one, 23 and something. And so it's just a perfect shelter. Now, a bait guy come in there and roll one through there, not even just throw it in and let it just roll through, it'd be great. And that's why, Craner and those guys, his guides, I mean, look up Don Craner's White River Lodge, I think it is, and just look at the size of these fish these guys catch. And they're bait guys, right, in gear. You'll see Johnny Morris and Bill Dance there once or twice a year. They're there because of the quality of the fishery. And so, but as far as that one goes, I think that was probably an anomaly where it T-bones that fish. But when one eats it, and that's how I got such a visual on it, wasn't like, if you've never caught a fish that's hooked if you've never had a fish eat your fish, you won't understand this. And people, they think we make this shit up or something. When a fish T-bones another fish, there's no hook in it. And they have no idea that you're on there. They just shake their head back and forth a little bit and float. And they're simply doing what they do. They hit it, grab it, and let it die, right? Yeah. And so I have never, and I don't know how many I've had eat my fish. I mean, on this river, on the Madison alone, I don't know, close in a dozen that have grabbed me. And shook around, grab it and try to kill the fish, and it's shaking out there. But not, when I say it's shaking its head back, but your line's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's just your rod's going, whoa, 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 what the hell's going on? And you see this thing just shaking the living shit out of that little fish. And that's what happened. They don't run. And I had one on the Platte River once. That thing was, I don't know. It could have been a lake fish. It was spring. I don't know why it would still be there, but it was 11 to 12, 13, 14, 15. That's hard telling. Probably 36, I don't know, really deep. And I was with Boomer Smith, this kid that, Steve Smith's kid. He's a great guy, and he's learning to fly fish. And that thing held on for probably, I don't know, 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
In 20 inches of water, full sun, me to you away. Would not run away from us. I mean, I'd walk out towards it. It's like I was going to try to net it and move out just enough but it wouldn't go anywhere. It just was going to do what it was going to do. So that particular trout, because of the size of the little pillow blocks that all these docks ride on, are 4 foot long. And so it's not, and there wasn't a lot of current either. And so it's just sitting there basically suspended, and it never shook its head either. While it was floating beside the docks, it just had it in its mouth.
Just T-boned.
Just
a 23-incher T-boned in its mouth.
It had it right behind the cleat, right behind the gill plates.
Yep.
And it had its throat, and then it went back, 4 inches plus to the where the other tooth, and it never shook, never did anything, just held on to it. Successfully killed it in less than 30 seconds. That fish did not swim. I mean, when I went for the net, I looked at it the whole time we were floating. We're on a drag chain, so we got a chain out, and you're kind of dragged with the current, right? And you go, it keeps you going straight. Is what it does. And so that fish was there, completely visible, frequently with maybe an 1.5 to 3 inches of its back out of the water, while its head's still completely underwater, by the way.
Ooh, that's shoulders.
It's got, this thing is it just went, it's a big hen, very short-headed hen. I mean, by that, probably 8, 9 inches long its head is. It's just staggering the size of this thing. But so just got to stare at it. I mean, just stare at it and stare at it. It's obvious it's not going to do anything. But then I start following it along the pillows, the rafts, the little rafts things. And that's when you see it's, a foot or so longer than each pillow. And you go, having taxidermied fish most of my life and done thousands of giant browns out of the Great Lakes and, and salmon and steelhead all over, and it's not my fish. I don't give a shit. I had no reason to exaggerate it, but I just looked at it, and I'm looking at it as a Chinook world. I'm looking at 60 pounds of fish without blinking.
Jesus.
Maybe more, because you can't see across it. And by the way, its bite radius is bigger than a 60-pound Chinook. Its bite width, I mean. And you'll see things when I've never seen a Sasquatch, so I can't go there, but you spend enough time in the world, out in the world, in nature, you'll see shit. And if you go out, if you really want to see one, go down or look up some of those night fishing cats. Look at their pages.
Yeah,
you'll see shit that you're just like, whoa.
There's one I don't want to mention because he's kind of a, I don't know, controversial figure in fly fishing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of cats that catch giant night fish.
Well,
down there.
and those 2 kids up in Canada that got the 2 world record rainbows. I mean, You back to back them things, it's not too hard to figure out. And they're crushing world records, right?
Yeah.
And so it's that fish in particular was just simply, and I don't think that's the biggest one I've ever seen. I've had 2. I saw one at night because I didn't like to do that because it was really controversial in the old days before anybody showed up. It was just kind of, people weren't really, I don't know. It's always been looked down on to shine fish, to go post up on, find them and go back and post up.
Yep.
I don't know. You're still, and for the most part, I think there's a limit This is total off the cuff. No science behind it, no diving witness, none of that kind of shit. I just think at a point that I don't think you could even mouse up a fish that starts getting to that, I don't care. I mean, the one that ate her fish, a 23.5-inch trout's plenty of food to stimulus. So, but I don't think I think when you're mousing and stuff like that, you're probably going to, I don't know, tomorrow somebody's going to post up a world record now and say, hey, dumbass, how about this one? This is a 50-inch that ate a mouse. But I think there's a point where maybe even night mouse and you just don't see them. But like I said, I saw that. I think that there's diminishing returns. I just don't think the mouse is going to throw a 40-pound fish to say, go up and do it. But that being said, when Tim Roller caught the world record, when he was guiding that guy from Rockford, I think he got that on a 5-inch Shad Rap. But that's a Lake Michigan fish that has come in. I think that record only stood for a few months and the guy from New Zealand broke it. But that was on a wood pile on the Manistee River. And that was a Shad Rap, I believe, 3 to 5 inch. And I don't remember what it was. I'm sure he'll tell me. But that's a fish coming out of the Great Lakes, which, by the way, there's plenty of 50-pound browns in the Great Lakes. The year I left for Montana, left Michigan, there was off Arcadia Beach, they trapped 2 50-pluses in a trap net. And one was a 3-year-old. Well, it's a 4-year-old, but there's a 4 and a 5-year-old, and they're both over 50. So, but those fish are eating exactly what he was throwing, right? Those fish are eating alewives and, stuff like that. And so juvenile rainbow, whatever, they can get, but they run a depth zones, right? And so they're kind of hip to their food sources and follow it. And I was just reading a thing in Montana Outdoors about how the walleye in Fort Peck they introduced Cisco, which is a huge food source in Michigan for the fish too. But I always thought of Cisco's as a 200-footer, that they would run that because we jigged them 100 to 200 foot for Cisco's and whiteys. And we go out and jig them on the ice or in a boat, and they were really deep. But now the Cisco's were put into, I think they said they put 60, a lot, and the juveniles in there. And now the walleyes have started to go deep on them, which is making it hard for the people to catch them. They're not going that deep, but they're going 60 to 100, I think they said. I don't know, it's just kind of glassing it. But anyway, so I have no, what's that guy's? There's a guy out of Milwaukee, I forgot, Erdman goes back and fishes with him. And they're always popping these 20, 30-pound browns just regularly, even through the ice they get these things. But anyway, the food source, back what I was getting at, was that the food source is a slower food source, dead, byproduct, gut piles and stuff like that. And I think even if you had a lemming, if you had like a 5-inch mouse, still think it's going to be hard to get, a 50-pounder when they can eat gut piles, and then that occasional 2-foot attack is different than chasing the surface on a mouse. So I could be wrong, but
it's kind of a continuation of your theory, which I think has been proven to be true, is, once a fish becomes of predator size, they eat less bugs. You can still get them on bugs, but the best way to target these things is a simple calorie equation, right? Effort expended for calories gained. That's why we throw streamers.
I made a comment, one of those videos one of the podcasts about having done taxidermied thousands of fish. And I made my living, that's how I kept my stores alive for 20 some years. But I made a comment, and I thought about it later, I was wrong. And a fish over 30 inches, I have never seen a bug in one, ever.
Really?
But that was wrong. When they put the Skamania into the Great Lakes, Used to be a really cool fishery. We'd take the boats out, bigger boats out, and dump off the side, get on what's called the scum line. It's a thermal inversion. And you can see that if the Lake Michigan's not a lake, it's a freaking
It's an
ocean.
ocean.
I mean, you can't see shore. When you can't see shore in any direction, you don't know the difference. And you're out in a freaking belly boat. That's what we used to go out in a literal, tube.
Yeah.
But you get out on the bigger boat and you dump off the edge and you'd sight fish the scum line. The lake's got to be flat, obviously, and the thermal incline will come up and it'll make a literal scum line down it. It's all bug. Lady bugs, beetles of all sorts, shit you would never think could be out there.
Yeah.
And yet, the Scamania would be. And I mounted I think it was a 20-pound Scamania that a guy got on a dry fly in a float tube. And that son of a bitch had, I don't know. And no, well, it's a rainbow, so, steelhead. But it was full of them.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a couple of weeks ago. I said that before. But as the trout rivers go, and understand, I grew up in Michigan, which if we may not have pioneered it, I would guess that somebody in PA did it, but it was sure a big thing all the way through the 1900s. And my dad was guiding in 1940, and he was doing it, and they were doing it a long time before that. We used to almost always fish right in dark wet fly swinging, right? And then the hex thing became so popular. It probably always was. And because the size of the fish, right? I was reading one of McWayne's books, I think it's The Sporting Club. And they're talking about, this is back in the early 1900s, they're talking about getting ready to go down and fish the big duns.
Cool.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think I know where, because I guided there so long, and my dad was like the first guy there. And so he knew all the log barons and all the people by name. Went to their houses.
Yeah.
What were left of them. And so, but at any rate, I just have at a certain size, I just don't see, and I think that would go right to the mousing for those fish on the white, right? I don't know, and I could be totally wrong, but I'm going to guess that even that, it's going to cap itself, So maybe in that 20-pound range, 25, I don't know, to get a fish to come up to the surface and go.
Right.
Now,
it's a lot of energy expended for
one
calories.
thing that you don't see many people talking about is dead rolling a mouse, right? We used to do that too. And it wasn't sexy, and it wasn't...
Like dead drifting it.
Oh, yeah. Down. No, sunk.
Oh.
Split shot.
You're nymphing a mouse.
I'm nymphing this. I never had great success. I did get a couple of fish up, but I didn't get any giants on it. But my dad used to talk about shingling mice, and they would literally put one on a shingle, they'd hook it. I don't remember, I think they rubber banded it on there or something, and they float a shingle down and they pull the mouse off there and then let it swim there until it would drown, and then they'd just sink it. And they caught some giant fish. It's called shingling. Shingling, yeah. You just float them down where you want them to go, right? Yeah. And then you pull them off and they struggle all over the place, and they drown eventually, and then they'll eat them. But you got a lot on top too, but maybe that'll be the code for a sunk mouse if you want to. It'd be so easy on the white to do that, where just rabbit or whatever, muskrat, just build your body up, it wouldn't matter. It's just a gob, and then just slow roll it just swing it. That's what I did. Actually, I got one on it doing that, two maybe, I don't remember, but it wasn't that successful for me. But I didn't want to do that, and it's not what I wanted. I wanted to fish at night for the dry flies, and just because it was cool. But so what I'm getting at is I think it's going to be hard even for the night people, just because I think those giants, if you don't have a 2-foot, if you want to troll a 2-foot fly up the river at night, you might get one.
Yeah.
But I think they're just so hip to that perfect food source where they get to eat them gut piles.
Yeah, gut piles, and then, Like a really giant fish, I wonder how many calories they need in a certain time span. Like, I wonder if anybody's done research on that. Like, the fish that
I
you saw, it had a 23-inch fish in its mouth. I wonder how long, if it eats that thing, it could just go lay up and not need
Yeah,
to eat for a month.
there's some research on this, and I can't remember. There is one book. I'm going to bring this over. I'm going to start introducing some books to this, and this one I can't remember what the. It's something rainbow. It's a just solely about rainbows. This guy's. I'm going to bring. I'm going to. I'm going to put it on here. I don't even know if it's still published. He has more observations than anybody I've ever seen in my life. It's such a fascinating book. It's a quick read, but he has detailed observations of caloric value for fish from like 3 inches to 20 inches. And so, and there's lots of stuff in there about how they can hold for 3 days on X amount of food, and it's not a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's higher for a small. The bigger the fish gets, it less expenditure in the sense that it's not running around and kicking like, and so, like where a 3-inch fish might need 10% of its body weight, every day or every 6 hours. It's broke down by hours. I'm going to get that book because I want to talk about it and some other stuff too. Because I think it's just Rainbow is the name or something. And the guy's a lake guy, right? But his observations of lunars and everything else that we don't play the game on, major minors, and fly guys are not so hip to playing all this stuff, and colors and all of that stuff. And he's got something in there about 20-inch rainbows. And I asked a biologist once because I caught that brown trout with the leopard frog in it on the Jordan that one night or day, in the winter. And it looked like it was completely like he ate it a second ago, other than it's dead.
Right.
Well, so is the brown. Maybe it wasn't when I caught the brown.
Yeah.
I killed it. I told you about that when it just swallowed the fly, and I got it in a gill. And it was December 23rd, I think. And it had been cold as hell. It's a funny term because hell's probably not that cold, but it's been really cold for at least 2 months. Like ground's froze. There's a foot of snow. It was October. We started getting snow, and this is December. My tradition used to always to go try to get a 3 to 5 pound steelhead for Christmas Eve dinner. I loved to stuff them like a turkey and bake them. And it was just I hardly ever killed a fish, but I would go get one little rainbow steelhead. And I got that brown, not intentionally, didn't kill it obviously, but it has a 7-inch leopard frog that it looks like it's been preserved. It is so perfect. And, but you have no way, did a bank wash out and it come rolling down? I don't know, but I think they have to eat. There's some other book, I can't remember what it was, that said that they could hold a fish like that, depending on water temperature, could be another reason the white's growing such huge fish. So if you can get a 20-inch fish or a 16-inch fish, and you can settle out and you can lay back, and your water temperature's cold, so you're not burning the caloric value because you're cold-blooded creature, and so you get to just sit there and absorb it. And so, but the Great Lakes, that's a whole nother thing there because those fish are traveling. But they have such a plethora of food sources. It's endless, right? And especially those alewives and whiteys and all the things that are super high fat contents. Those are the kickers. You get in those places that have Cisco's and whiteys and alewives, and I don't know about the gobies. I don't know if they run to that depth zone since I left. They weren't there when I left. But I don't know. As far as that fish goes, it's kind of a long-winded thing about, but it goes to all fish. It goes to all trout. It doesn't matter. It's food source, water, quality and temperature and speed. That just, no matter where you go. You go up on the Mo, why do you think there's so many freaking giants on the Mo? It isn't exactly a raging current. You know? I mean, you want to go
almost a
float
lake
tubing?
at times.
You want to make friends? Go up and put in at the dam and float tube down to the creek
You know what?
and have a beer party. Yeah, that'll make you a lot of friends. But it's made to just sit there, right? So they're not on that treadmill.
No.
And it's the same. No, it's no different than some of the lake. You get these little lakes. Like there's a couple lakes down here where they don't have as much room to roam, but it's got a huge food source. And suddenly there's all these 24, 6, 7, 8-inch trout in it, just living big. Shit, the lakes aren't, you can almost, not crash across them, but they're not very big. And so,
Yeah, it's all about food intake and
Yeah.
calories expended. I mean,
exactly, there it is.
It's the exact opposite of trying to lose weight as a human.
And it's
right?
also why something that we don't do, well, we do, a lot of people don't do. In Michigan, I never saw it. And then in Minnesota, when I was fishing with Andy, it was amazing the size of fish he was getting on creeks.
Mm-hmm.
Creeks do not rip through. I mean, mountain creeks, one thing, but you see these meadow creeks or spring creeks back in the Midwest or here, they aren't bucking much current. They have lots of places where some of those places over there where we fish you look at them, they're suspended. They look like they're asleep.
Yeah.
And they're 2 foot long or more. And they're just sitting there barely half-assed moving their body to stay in one place, come up slow to eat a dry fly. They're not in a hurry for anything. Nothing's getting away from them, right? If they want it, they're going to get it. And if it's a dry fly, they aren't going to race. You don't ever see. You get on this river, you'll see a fish bolt sideways 2 foot. It's like, there it is. Got to get it.
Yep.
Not on those. And people don't fish creeks. People that fish creeks don't talk about fishing creeks because they don't want your ass there. People are always talking about how busy this place is. Well, take a walk and you'll see. It's just expenditures.
Yeah, I always see people talking about, if you're really fat and you want to lose weight, there's all these new fad diets and everything. It's simple. Eat less
The elf diet.
than the calorie output. Right?
Elf diet. Eat less food.
Yes, yeah. I saw it. Okay.
Not that hard.
Okay, so I saw a funny one that's always stuck with me is some gal on Instagram was like, hey, does anybody have any good exercises, like neck exercises to lose neck fat and face fat?
I got the perfect one.
Well, the top response was, so you turn your head left and then you turn it to the right. Now do this whenever anybody offers you food, fatty.
Oh, my favorite, having put hundreds and hundreds of people on diets over the other career. What's the best exercise for losing weight? Table push-aways.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. That'll save you a lot.
So to bring us back to the trout world, it's the opposite, right? Like
Exactly.
whenever people are asking where big fish sit, I like the expression of the couch in between all the treadmills. Like if you were a really large person, where would you want to be? Well, you want to be on the couch with the food, not moving.
Golden Corral with the
endless. Yes, exactly.
with the endless dessert bar.
Yeah, double.
So in other words, if you're a trout, dessert to you is that gut pile getting thrown in the river, floating to you. You don't even have to go to it. It'll come to you.
It comes right to you.
And it's, I talked about another about that. It was my buddy Jimmer. There's Johnny and Billy back in Michigan. They send me these pictures, these huge browns, right? And there was a spot at the hatchery where every night at 11 they dumped the hatcheries, and all the dead fish came out. And I walked upstream. I didn't even know it was there. I knew it had to happen someplace. The ponds where they were raising the whatever cohos or whatever it was they were raising. They die. Some of them do. They're huge places, but they dump those. They get caught up at the screens and then they dump them at night or whatever. And I found the outlet. And it was like hiding in this. It was just like built. It's a tube coming out. It's like about 8-inch tube, I'd say, maybe 6 or 8. And it come out and it comes right to the river. And there's this little. You walk in the bank. I think I stepped in it actually. It's kind of like where a muskrat house or run would go up. And I see this tube, and I'm like, well, son of a, there you go. and I went back, and I look in there, and I see this tail. It's like that. And it's under the tube completely. I mean, the tube's sticking, you got to see it. And here's this tail sticking behind the tube. And like, that son of a bitch sits there all day and waits until night. And so then he goes back in the river when they dump it, and he gets them. And so I would go back there and at night, and I got him. And I mean, it was big fish. But I think Johnny got it too, but not our Johnny.
Different Johnny.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, they did, maybe Bill did. I don't know, one of them did. Both despicable humans, so.
Okay, so.
I still owe Hendershot a lot of money. He's the one that did he's my dentist. And I moved right after he did all my work, left him hanging.
You got a warrant out for your arrest back there?
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, so thanks, Zach, for the question. I think we got a lot of airtime out of that one. Sort of a related question to what we were talking about. Paul Wayland Golf, at Paul Wayland Golf, left this comment.
Well, you know Paul Wayland.
We do?
Yes.
I'm terrible with names.
He's been at streamer school. He's been in and out forever.
All right. Well, hey, Paul. Thanks for
Same
watching.
one.
I'm better with faces, so maybe I recognize you. But if you wanted to catch a 2-foot brown trout, what Western River would you go to? What time of the year? What time of day or night? What would you use? And so we're immediately going to nix that first question of which Western River would you go to, because I don't think we want to get
you to go to the Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Or the Mo.
Yeah, Yellowstone. I mean, we're not going to give away any secrets on here. Go do your own research. But yeah, those fisheries are famous because they're great fisheries, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the river I would tell you not to go to is this one.
Right.
This is not a 2-footer river. I mean, again, that's why I brought it up just a second ago about the speed of the Missouri. The Missouri is a great 2-footer river, but still, that's a hallowed mark. I mean, that's a giant freaking mark, and everybody knows it that are real anglers know that that's a, he said Western, right?
Yep.
I'll throw some out there because I don't think it's that big a secret. The South Fork of the Snake, that's a great one. The Yellowstone's a great one. The Missouri's a great one. I don't really count cuddies, but there's some drainages around here. There's some that I don't want to talk about because I think they got overused too, but we'll just leave it at those. You can look at that type of river. You'll see that's why they're there. They're big. They've got food source,
plenty of resting
tailwaters make it really beneficial. You'll get more when they can control that water. And it was 3-part. What was it? What time of year? What was?
Yeah, so let me get back to it. Sorry, phone locked up.
Time of year it'll probably be little country.
Yeah, what time of year?
Time of year is usually spring when you're going to get your big ones. Everybody wants to fish in the fall, and that's because they can see them and they're spawners. But historically, you get your biggest fish in the spring. They're hyperphagic, coming off of a winter. They're more apt to be looking. You have more juvenile fish in the river. You have a higher food source because you haven't eaten all the juvenile fish, because your brown trout spawn in the fall, your rainbow spring in the spring. Last year's rainbows, as the brown trout, are getting swim up in Alvin and juvies, your rainbows and your whitefish, that class year, 1 year, is the perfect food source. Mm-hmm. And they're moving all over. They're like young gazelles in the fields when the lions are out there. They're like, and they're potted up, and a lot of times they'll school up, and there's a lot of stimulus to the trout, and they're coming off a winter where they've not had as much food or they're slowed down, and so your biggest fish generally tend to be And there's a bunch of things about that. One, your water temps, as you come off a sustained cold water temp, and when you get that 6 to 10 degree shift and you get into that mid 40s, low 50s all of a sudden, the fish are more active, and so are your juveniles. And so a lot of food sources are happening, and you've got a high concentration of bug life in the midge and the early season beta stuff. And so your juvies, that gets them moving, right? Everybody's kind of, like I said, like baby gazelles out in the Serengeti, and they're popping and jumping, and everybody's thinking about killing them and eating them. And so that is a great time, because when you can hit that first 52 to 56 degree water, man, that just seems to be a let's go kill shit thing, right? And so they just start getting after it then. And you got fish that are more willing to chase because they've warmed up, right? They're not sitting in that cold all winter. And so it's hard to get a really cold water fish, unless it's like the white that is never changes. That's kind of their life.
Because then they're accustomed to it.
We're not doing this. I mean, you can see it even in the summer that flux temperature drops 6-8 degrees, and you might have a hard time that first 2 hours. Catch it on a bump as it's going up, everybody's happy. And so the bigger rivers like that, food source, of course, is always in there. And I missed a lot of rivers intentionally. You got to see the water. All you got to do is see the types of water I'm talking about. And they're generally great holding water, not a ton of pressure on the fish. It's not like a constant. They need to be able to get away from that huge flows. And so fall, like I said, is usually when people they're targeting big browns. I think if they made it illegal to catch fish on a bed, which it would be great for me that you lost your license for 5 years, even though I did it most of my life, and I'm kind of a freaking hypocrite because I spent most of my life chasing steelhead and salmon in the Great Lakes. In the first 69 to 7 till close to 80, that's all you fish steelhead was always in the spring.
Right.
On the beds. I mean, we went looking for the shiny spot, right?
Yeah,
and
the feeding gravel.
Oh God, there'd be shit tons of them on there, right? And then in the fall, the salmon show up. Well, that's what they're there for. You never see them until they hit the spawning.
Right.
I mean, they come in, hold up. You get a 3 to 5 day window maybe before they move up. They'll station up. Actually, they do it in late June, July, and those fish are set up. You can fish to those, the salmon. Nobody does it because they can't line them. But that's the only time they'll actually eat. They'll eat a fly if you swing it on them.
Yeah.
You won't land many. God dang, they're hot. I think I did my biggest day ever swinging for summer Chinook. I had 11 fish on and never even got one. I didn't get one within 50 feet of the boat. Never once.
Damn.
I mean, I'm just like, this is getting boring. It's on the big river. It's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Pretty much just you think, and and then they woodpile your ass. But at any rate, so I just, if you take fall fishing away from spawning, I think you'd see, if you took those fish, because that's not how you should be fishing them. But again, did it all my life. And I did it for brown trout too. I won't sit here and tell you I didn't do, because people ask me about all my big fish, and I'm a little hesitant to talk about most of them because a shit ton of them came off a bed. And swinging through runs where I know there's beds, deep beds in particular. Yeah. When you can find a 5-foot spawning red, if there's a brown trout, and but they're Great Lakes brown trout. Yeah. I'm not talking about Madison River brown trout. And I'm not, for some reason I could separate myself. I wouldn't, that's not true either. I've done it on the little rivers too. I did it on one of them, but in the old days they weren't open. So that was the difference. It used to be the last Saturday in April, third Saturday in April until October 1st or whatever it was. And so our fish got respite. And then the steelhead got, which were always there. They were there 100 years before the salmon were in there. But we got steelhead seasons, and that opened it up. And we got year-round fisheries, which I'm still opposed to. I wasn't in the day. I don't like being that old guy that sits and bitches about all the new stuff, and
Old man yells at cloud.
Yeah, it bugs me, but and I was never, I didn't think of it in the same way. It's not the fishing. I just think the fish should get a break, and I really, even if they took sections, it just said the DNR and the fish wildlife and parks here, whatever, they kind of get their heads up their ass. They just don't. It's like, well, just think about it. I mean, why can't you close that section up there between the lakes? Just close the son of a bitch.
And the entire thing is a spawning.
October, yeah, it's one giant spawning habitat. October to May 1st. Let them, all the browns would be in there. They could be done. The browns don't start till November to speak of. And they could have all winter to just do it, right? And in the old days, when the river would close, and again, I would be open to saying, you got a section here, you can fish this section. How hard is it to go ask a guide, where do the fish spawn? Well, from here to there, right? And of course, they do spawn all over the river, but the lion's share of it's usually done in the same sections, right?
Yep.
And so, but that's just kind of historically, that's how we did it. But now, but even if then, like I said, if you took the shiny spot in the river, which I'm referring to as the spawning red, and if you took that away, I think you'd see you still caught more giant fish in the spring. But again, people didn't fish spring as much. People much prefer to fish fall. I mean, it's nicer weather, it's more predictable, generally speaking, and the fish is colored up, but those fish tend to be capping right at 2 foot anyway. When you're going to see not to say they don't all, somebody's going to write in, I was on such and such and I got a 30-incher in July. No shit. Yeah, that happens too. But we're asking for predictions here. I'm going to shoot for spring. I am going to shoot for spring, and I am going to fish in rivers that I know carry big fish, and which we will do. We start here pretty soon. We start filming again for shows. We're going to target rivers we know do it. And he also asked about style.
Yeah, he said, what would you fish? Streamers.
I wrote this down because, as you all know, I am a bass junkie. I'm an everything fish junkie. And we were tying I saw a piece of that show we shot, tying the fathead kitty. Mm-hmm. And I'm always saying that this is my favorite fly. And I broke that down saying how, I got suspension flies and stalling flies and accelerating flies, and I have jig flies, and they're all by categories. If you see my fly boxes, there isn't like, I don't
he's got blue tape on it that says jig flies.
Jig flies, stall, flatliners, bangtails, things that are going to do this. And so, and I'm watching the most famous bass angler current day, Kevin Van Dam's new show called The Van Dam Experience. And he's a Michigan guy, but means nothing. It's just that I was watching the last one, and he was fishing Lake Cahuga, and he said, which I think's really critical I'm always harping about this, don't be a one-trick pony. Don't pull the rope and that's all you've got. If you do nothing, if you're a rope puller, learn to jig the fly. Just have two things you can do, right? And then that will morph you into 4 or 5. And then you'll see that your accelerator fly will be your favorite accelerator fly, but it ain't worth a shit to jig.
Yep.
Right? So then you just broadened your horizon and you're not a one-trick pony. Now, Kevin Van Dam, last week we showed how much that show did we publish that thing about MLF for the heavy hitters thing? 300,000 for first place.
That's going to be
Was it in a different one?
1 week from today.
Okay. Well, I took a
1
picture
week
because they
ago
showed
today.
the money board, right?
Yep.
At the end. And top number one for a week's tournament, 300K. I think there was a $100,000 single biggest fish bonus. Number two is $50,000. You want to hit number one.
Yeah, it pays to win.
That's a discrepancy. They're usually not that huge, right? But it's heavy hitter. So, but at any rate, here's the best angler.
What is it? If you ain't first, you're last.
In that case, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
But in this show, and it just spoke volumes to my brain, because here's the greatest, winningest bass angler in history. And mind you, bass fishing now has collegiate, it has high school. High school, you can scholarship into bass fishing.
Isn't that crazy?
Mostly that's not true. There's a lot out here too. It's big money.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, you can make a great living doing it. But back to Kevin, and he's on, like I said, he's on Lake Cahuga, and he's talking about setting it up and how he designed, how he pre-fishes and what he looks for and how he breaks this lake down. He goes, the bottom line is this lake just fits my style. You're talking about the most diverse fisherman you fish everything. You better have everything. But he said, it fits my style. So to answer your question, I like accelerator flies, but I catch most of my big fish on stalls.
Yeah.
But I like to rip flies like a Slick Willie and watch that thing kick, or a sheep herder where I can stall it and then kick it like crazy.
So when you say accelerator flies, for those who don't know, what
that'd be like running a crankbait if you don't know what that, but it's a fast retreat. It's a fast, lots of kick to the fit. Like it's a minnow that's running and then injured. Stalling simply means you run the hell out and then you kill it and you just let it, oof. I always say, you're running like hell and, I got a cramp. Oh shit, I can't move. Oh, I'm okay. And you take off again, right? That's an accelerator fly. You're burning it. For those of you fish lakes, if you've never done that with a booby thing, where you just rip your fly back and then just stop and let it sit there and let it sink. Give it a 5 count. And then you do it again. Maybe you might only do 2 stalls where you come back, but you're getting the fish's attention, right? Lake is different. The river wise, you're asking so I'm up on the mow. I'm gonna have 3 styles that I'm gonna do. My favorite fly on a burn is a Slick Willie. And I'm gonna have a stall fly, which is either gonna be a bang tail or a sheep herder, which a sheep herder, I think we still sell. It never caught on. Look up the video on how to tie it.
I think FC stopped tying it.
Huh? Well, I told him to start tying it because I don't have to tie my own.
Yeah.
But
I didn't want to be the one to break the news to you.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna I have enough, but anyway.
We'll call Jake.
So I'm gonna have an accelerator fly that I can rip really haul ass with. If you're a rope puller, this is your fly. That's a fly that you just pop, and you can slow down once in a while in the middle of that, and that'll help you. And then I'm gonna have a stalling fly that I can kind of come across. I like to go across shoals. You're gonna particularly want to look for that kind of shoaly stuff, rocky stuff in the spring. You're gonna be looking for where your bait fish are, and they do not hang out in flats. They need to be where fish are. And so look for cover that will hold juveniles. So then I'm gonna have a burning bait fish style, like a Slick Willie, or even a bang tail, something like that. Dungeon can be a pretty good burner. And then I'm gonna have a stalling fly that I can burn and settle down, like a sheep herder's really good, and a flatliners are really good for that and stuff like that. And then I'm gonna be the most important fly that's gonna be in my box, gonna be a jig, and that's gonna be a crayfish fly. It's spring. I need things that can slow down. I need a fly that can go very lethargically up and down, and not burn. You have to have at least 2 styles. You can almost blend your burner and your staller. You could have one fly that does that. You can stall a Willie too. But yeah. I mean, my favorite staller's definitely a flatliner. But and again, that's my favorite, right? And people, oh, you always say that. Well, I got
favorite of
speeds of stalls and speeds of burners. If I'm going to rip it, when I say that, it's what I gravitate when I go and I grab it out of the box first, right?
It's all about conditions too, right? Like if it's high sun, I love the Slick Willie. Not that they won't eat it in the low light, but I'm going to opt for a different pattern.
Got to put that all into your equation. But man, if nothing else, you could be, and in the bass world, you could say Kevin Van Dam's nickname's Dr. Crankenstein because he uses crankbaits, right? Yep. Most of what he does is on a crankbait. And I was watching him fishing, and he says, I'm not a big worm guy, but he does win this tournament, I think, running a worm. Mm-hmm. Now, he doesn't know how to run it, and he's not dumb enough to say, well, I like crankbaits. I only like to do this with pull my rope, right? Well, you're not dumb enough not to go for that $300,000. You're not going to be sitting there and die, but we will. We will die with, people will just, I'm going to fish this, and if it doesn't work, tough shit. I could never do that ever in my life. And so, but for sure, you're going to have something that you can fish quickly, accelerate, and you've got to have something that goes low and slow. And that's got to be, it can be leechy, like a peanut envy. It can be a crayfish pattern. For that matter, you could almost run some sculpin patterns that way. Ones that you can lift up and down. But what you have to have is a fast and a slow game. It'd be no different than golf analogy. So you got to have a long game and a short game.
Yep.
Ours is just speeds.
It's like just, Patrick Mahomes. You got to be able to check down and throw the long ball.
It helps to win and that's winning. And in the spring, remember, accelerator stuff is almost always warmer water. So you're coming into spring. You got a morning game. You got an afternoon game. You start on the low slow, you see if they'll eat. I always start fat. So I'm just telling you what I would do if I wasn't hooked on a white fly first thing I throw. Yeah. I just do it, but you've heard me tell this 1,000 times. I might, if I'm really being stubborn, I might run that 5 minutes. Just because it's me getting in my rhythm. It's like I'm out and I'm just kicking it and seeing if anything's gonna come up. I'm stalling, as I do it, I'll start one way and I'll get halfway through the retrieve and I'll see a wood pile or a rock pile. I'll stall it over top of it and kick it along. I get to see the white fly. Yeah. I can see what it's doing.
Theoretically, it's like name any pro sport. They don't immediately jump into the game. Yeah. You got to shoot around before a basketball game for 4 hours. They're warming up. That's kind of what you're doing with the white fly, right?
Yeah, and the white fly gets me warmed up. And I see, and again, I'm not always looking for the fish to completely commit. If I can get one to even give me one of them drive-bys, that's all I need. Just roll up on me and say, well, you almost figured it out, right? And then I can say, okay, well, it wasn't aggressive enough, or it was, I stalled at the wrong moment, whatever it was. And I can start to get in the game. And so, but in the spring in particular, I mean, you just have to have a low and slow. I don't, leaching, I mean, my go-tos is an olive peanut envy and a brown peanut envy is kind of when I'm checking, when I'm looking out there, right? And so, but I almost always start with a white dudgeon or a white boogie for my warm-up, for my first 5. I mean, you fished with me hundreds of times. It's just how I start. And then, but the second I'm done with my warm-up shots, or whatever you called it, man, now you're in the game and you're moving it quick and you change with a purpose and you go. And so
it's a chess match.
Yeah. Right. Now just start making that happen. Don't wait for it. Just you start making that happen. And that keeps you engaged too. The more you do that, but back to Paul's question, it's going to be a bigger, slower river, probably. Not super, I mean, like the Mo or something like that.
Not the Madison.
Not the Madison.
I mean, between all of our guide staff and everyone, how many 2-footers we see last year?
Oh, I don't know. Under a dozen.
Andrew had one. We made a video of it just to show you how rare they are here. Remember the video we made of Andrew catching his, netting it?
Yeah.
He yelled a lot of curse words and was like, it looked like he just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He was so jacked up, which that kind of is out here, right?
It's a giant fish anywhere.
It's a
even
huge fish,
even
yeah.
on the white, when people, which is I think probably the highest concentration of giant browns in the U.S., maybe in the world, who knows? A 2-footer still a 2-foot. That's a total predator. That's still a giant fish. Don't ever anybody ever gives you that. Oh yeah, I get. When they give you that, oh, I get those all the time. They're so full of shit. They listen to Alice and what's his name? Alice and they're the ones that run boom boxes. Don't listen to them. By the way, we talked about, was that last week?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, somebody asked, because I said no rush, no queen, no dead. And I was listing off all my stuff that I do like. And a guy wrote in and said his buddy listens to, is it Alice and Jay? A dumb name. But I heard it this morning on the way in here. It was hilarious. They were talking about the whole thing about, I didn't know that the lead singer killed himself, but they were just talking about how the demise of the band, and they played it. I stand by it. Don't fish with the guy. God, that's awful.
Not your kind of music.
Oh
huh?
my God, it's awful. Which ironically, you asked me if I like Pearl Jam. I do like Pearl Jam, which is weird because that's the
Seattle
same
grunge
shit.
scene,
Same.
yeah.
I don't. It's not. It wasn't that. But if that stuff was blaring, I guarantee you, you'd have shots coming. It's like.
See, the other guy said, I need to put you on some Working Man's Dead. I'll curate a little Dead playlist for you. I'm going to change you.
Trust me. We already came to the fact that I liked when Merle Sanders is on it.
Yeah,
And that's different, though. But anyway, back to Paul's question. That would be the short, long. Nothing's ever short. The long answer was
short story long, right?
Yeah, just look for, and there's, frequently if you want to see a 2-footer, you have to separate yourself from feeding areas for fish where there's a lot of dry fly stuff. They just don't tend to hold often the same, the 2-foot and above. Just look slow. Look for places you think that crayfish should live,
Yeah.
because that's going to be your.
really
I saw another,
prolific
by
feed
the way,
source.
saw an incredible thing on In Fisherman. Al Linder is maybe my favorite. I don't know. I got a lot of. I love that guy's show. Been on forever, and God, he's closing 80 now, and still out there just crushing it, right? But they had they had a thing on crayfish eating, and it's fascinating because like I said, I found parts. That's my number one thing of finding in a fish's stomach when we were talking about all the fish I mounted, and never finding in a 25, 6 or better, never finding a bug in one, even though they were caught during the hex hatch. But it seems like there's not any in them. But all the 2-footers, bait caught, a lot of them. Never once did I find a bug in one. But crayfish parts were always in them. Tails, maybe a piece of a pincher, maybe just a piece of the carpus, something. And they were showing how they come up, and they're all bass, and much bigger olfactory feeder than a trout is. And so they would come in and they just stare at it, right? And the crayfish is sitting there like, come on, yeah, bring it, right? And bite it,
Yeah.
and shake the hell out of it and let it go and just walk away. And they say they won't eat a hard shell crayfish. They molt
Yeah.
23 to 26 times a year.
So
there's a lot of molting, but there's a final molt when they're soft shelling, I mean, the juveniles molt really quickly, right? It's not as big a deal. But they say that they can smell the difference, but they are still willing to go down and bite it, shake it. And they just showed, half a dozen of them just swim away. And they didn't chase them or anything. And they said they could smell the fact that they had a softer shell than when they're not molting.
This is just a theory. I clearly don't know what I'm talking about, but the videos I've seen of bass eating, they do, that like suction eat, the inhale. I wonder if they have a weaker bite strength than a brown trout. And if a brown trout grabs a crayfish and is able to crack its shell, and they can do a better job of decomposing it that way.
When I watched the smallmouth, because I think smallmouth have a lot of the same tendencies as brown trout. I always say they're just brown trout without spots.
Or teeth.
Yeah. But I don't know, in the summer, when you see a soft shell event going on and you pick up a brown trout, its stomach will crunch. Like back in the river where Jerry lives on the Muskegon. When those things soft shell, every fish in that river's eaten. Yeah. Every smallmouth, every trout, every brown. I mean, they used to go out at night and they'd get them and they'd roll, they'd fish soft shell crabs or crayfish, annihilate the river. No, they will not let one go by. Period. End of discussion. They'll eat until they're coming out, just like they will with hexes when they're doing that night thing. And it's a night event. They don't crawl around in the daytime and do this stuff. They crawl to shore. It's a migration. It's cool as shit. Yeah. And they can be orange. They can be all kinds of colors, right? You'll never see. They only do that when the shell's gone. The shells are olivey brown, and then they'll get kind of blue looking when they're really hard, and then they'll be orangey. It's a sci-fi to see it happen. But watching them eat the smallmouth, I've seen a lot of trout. Bull trout do it always, but a lot of trout will eat my fly and shake their heads. And I've always assumed and again, they've got quite a bite strength, they got teeth. And I have found a lot of hard pieces. So the claws and pieces of the carpet. In particular, I find that, I should know this, but I think it's 3 or 5, the little paddles on their tail, right? They scoop of that thing and they're a different shape. They're scale shaped. I find those in fish all the time when I was mounting a lot of fish, trout wise. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to happen with a bass, especially on the Great Lakes. So it's what I would mount a lot of those, 5-6 pound smallmouth that come in, and I think Scotty Vanderplug had one once that I think it had 5. They weren't very big. They were only about that big crayfish in it, but you knew what he's eating. Wasn't too hard to figure out. So, but like I said, that's been the most common thing, which gives me the confidence that I have very seldom had one turn a crayfish down, even if there's not the right time of year. If you slow jig it and do its thing, and and it goes back to that bass. They were biting them. You could see they were looking at them and smelling them. They'd bite them, completely gone.
Yeah,
the crayfish is gone,
inhale.
and poof, out it goes, and whew, he just swims away. Yeah. And they didn't chase it. So it's like they were tested.
Testing to see. Yeah.
And then there's always that curiosity thing. I mean, if you make something look sexy in the water and it's doing its thing, going up and down, and everything's cool, they're inquisitive. They eat a lot of shit that doesn't look like anything.
A lot of sticks and rocks.
Yeah, just watch them, watch your fly and see, when you see a fly jig up and down like that and one comes out, it'll change you. You'll realize that you triggered it, not, didn't just happen. That's a long way around the barn.
Well, I think it's a good time to go into the barn, leave the barn, whatever. Wrap this show up.
Put the horse in the barn?
There it is.
There you go.
Thanks. Not great with the farm analogies. Let's wrap this show up. Got anything else to add?
No, that was fun. I would like, if somebody out there in particular that knows, I'm sure there's some, Andy Sabota's probably going to call it. I would really like, I don't have any real specific data, which I've always wanted, on exactly how long at what temperature a fish can hold how much fish.
How many calories they need for a given time.
There's a bunch of it in salt water.
Yeah.
But there's nothing on the trout world that I found, at least. I'm sure there's.
Well, there might not be data. I mean, how many 40
I guarantee.
How many 40-pound fish are
there? It could be a 20-inch trout. I don't care. I mean, it's going to be the same, somewhat of a ratio. And I'm going to get that book on, I don't even know if, I'm going to go home and bring it over. I'm going to show it. And then because I want to talk about this guy's book. I want to talk about rainbow versus brown things, but some of the stuff on this book too. And you can see, I don't know if it's an old book. It was actually in a house I bought. I think it was in the Big Hole. I don't remember which house it was. And it was, but I bet I've read that thing 5 times, cover to cover. I don't, because as you know, I like to fish lakes as equally as much as I do the rivers. And so I just thought it was one of the most fascinating books I've ever seen. I ran home and got this book because I was afraid I'd forget about it. It's called Rainbow Trout Fly Fishing, a guide for still waters. At the very least, I don't know if all this stuff's really accurate. It could be. The guy, Ron Newman, that wrote it, at the very least, he coalesced dozens and dozens of anglers, and they kept records for years on all kinds of stuff. And so I was talking about this thing and about the trout's behavior and when they're eating food and how much they could absorb and all that. And he's got a bunch of stuff in there. If you're a stillwater person, you're going to dig this book. I mean, but there's a bunch of stuff that just relates to trout habit. This is about rainbows, but I don't know. I just thought it was a really cool book. So, and this show is brought to you by SlideIn.com and books like this. So if you get the chance, you might want to order it up. They're not very expensive, but man, it's a wealth of knowledge. Whether it's all completely accurate, I don't know. I didn't find anything in it that I thought there was any controversial thought processes about like, wow, there's no way that's happening. I just thought it was incredible how long they took records and how many lakes and how many different anglers. So I don't know. Like I said, brought to you by SlideIn.com. Order if you can. Thanks.
Well, Jake just walked in, so we'll wrap up the podcast there. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Hope you liked it. Shaker.